Hey, Central Michigan University Pre-Service Teachers. My name is Jeremy Windsor. I am the middle school and high school science educator at Fulton Schools. Predominantly, I teach courses in life science, earth science, and environmental sciences. Now, above any other time in history, you have an opportunity to really come in out of the classroom at college and be a leader in education. Many of us who have been sitting in the classroom for long periods of time are unsure what the post-pandemic education world will look like. There's probably going to be a substantial amount of online education, and you, above anybody else, will have a better understanding of how that will work. Oftentimes, budgets are tight in the public school system, which causes a limit on resources to be used in the classroom. Teachers are left to pick up the ball and find financial resources that will help them with the projects that they wish to initiate in their class. Today, I'd like to start you off with a video to give you a picture of what my classroom looks like. I use inquiry as a model for developing scientific consensus in my classroom. My students spend a substantial amount of time exploring natural phenomena in order to understand the world around them, and thereby develop scientific understanding. As I'm sure you noticed, there are quite a few different clips in that video related to fish or watersheds or streams or rivers. Our school is a Salmon in the Classroom member school. Salmon in the Classroom is a program that is sponsored by the Michigan DNR. We use that program in a cross-curricular, interdisciplinary way. There's a lot of information that you can find on my school website related to how specifically we use that material to teach kids in our middle school. So feel free to check that out. Many of the things that we did with Salmon in the Classroom require a substantial financial input. As such, we spent a lot of time seeking out opportunities to gain that financial input through third parties outside of our school. Whether you intend on being a social studies, language arts, math, or science teacher, you may find that Salmon in the Classroom is a useful tool for you in your classroom. Some of the things that I've used funding for include technology, like hardware and software that I use in my classroom, drones, cameras, digital video equipment, consumable classroom supplies. I've got a number of different forms of incubators that I use in my science classroom, including incubators for fish eggs and also incubators for bird eggs. Tanks, chillers, filtration equipment for all of our Salmon in the Classroom tanks. Trail cameras. We've constructed an entire 30 by 60 greenhouse on our school grounds that we were able to raise funds for through many of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Construction materials that are consumable, that can be used by kids in order to engage in different forms of inquiry-based learning. And there's a whole host of other things that I've used funding for. So let's get started. As mentioned, my name is Jeremy Windsor. I am the Fulton Schools middle school and high school science teacher. Part of the reason I'm sitting in front of you today is because somebody somewhere thought I had some expertise. I was recognized this past year as the 2019-20 Michigan Farm Bureau Ag Educator of the Year. I was also recognized as the Michigan Department of Education Region 4 Teacher of the Year. I also had an opportunity to co-author the Michigan Department of Education Learning at a Distance Guidelines, which came out right at the onset of this pandemic. They were meant to be a guide for teachers as they were returning to a distance learning environment and trying to help kids through the end of last school year. My education includes an undergraduate degree from Central Michigan University with an emphasis in Earth and Space Science as well as biology. I also have a graduate degree from Cornerstone University in Educational Leadership. That allows me to be a principal if I ever choose. So how do you get your vision fully funded for some of the activities or projects that you may want to incorporate into a classroom, especially knowing that budgets are tight in districts currently? Some of the things that I have funded specifically within my classroom with the amounts include $100,000 for the purchase of that greenhouse that was previously mentioned, $2,500 for an initial aquaponics project that we now have inside of our greenhouse, over $15,000 for our Salmon in the Classroom program over the course of about 10 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 for rainbow trout eggs. We get those delivered from Utah on a yearly basis, $2,000 to develop additional aquaponics systems that we use in my earth science class and then enter a competition that is hosted through Lake Superior State University along with MSU. $1,800 for large chillers, and specifically the one that I'm focusing on there was one that we purchased in less than 24 hours. And I'll talk a little bit about seeking out opportunities from local businesses and then doing dollar-for-dollar challenges. $2,500 for a flight coop at a previous district. I've already mentioned the incubators. Specifically, we have one for incubating chicken and quail eggs at the expense of about $750. $3,500 for various other projects, including pumps, seeds, hatching trays, PVC, construction materials, etc., along with smaller $100 intervals for different things like I mentioned earlier in technology or software or different forms of video or video editing materials. I've found that one of the most useful locations for you as a teacher are your local community foundations. A lot of these materials can be found on the internet. If you just simply search Google Community Foundations and the state of Michigan, you'll get an entire list of them. For me, my local community foundation is the Gratiot County Community Foundation. Fulton Schools is south of CMU's campus, about 45 minutes. So we are the next district south of Ithaca. We are in Gratiot County, and as such, that foundation has allotted us a lot of financial abilities. I highly recommend that you seek out your local community foundations to find funding. When you do seek out these foundations, there is usually a protocol that you have to go through. There's an initial writing stage, and you will have to write based on the criteria that they have set up. I know the first time that I wrote a grant, I thought, okay, I've got the entire project done. I think it's important to recognize and to let you know that that is not the case. There is substantial work after the grant has been awarded. So please be aware that there will be a lot of time up front in the initial writing, But there will also be time in documenting specifically how that fund or how those funds were used. Things like pictures and thank yous are always important as well when finalizing grants and sending final reports. A resource that you may find useful if you're looking up community foundations or various foundations in your geographic area is tgci.com/funding sources/Michigan/community. This website organizes all of the community foundations alphabetically. It also tells the geographic focus for that community foundation or for that foundation. So you can scroll through the list, find ones that are specific to your area. You can click on that. I'm going to click on the Kalamazoo Community Foundation. The cool thing about the link is that it will tell you the total annual giving. Each one of these foundations identify that total amount they allot annually. And so if I'm a grant seeker and I want to know what is the total amount that is given by the foundation in my area, I can look that up and I can use that information in distinguishing the ones that maybe I want to put extra special emphasis on. If I know that the one foundation gives a very large amount of financial resources annually, but another foundation is much lower, I might focus on the higher giving foundation initially and then use some of those materials to transition my focus to some of the lower giving foundations. There's information for contact as well. Feel free to reach out to your local foundations, make a phone call, make contact, let them know what you're doing and what your plans are, and they'll probably have some insight as well. We know that personal relationships are important with our students. Also understand that developing these personal relationships with the people that are working at these foundations is going to benefit you as well. Another very cool thing about this website is that they have specific links to that foundation's website. So I can click on the link and I can learn more about the Kalamazoo County Foundation or any of the other foundations in my specific region. I'm going to go back and pull up another foundation. Since we're Central Michigan University, let's check out the Mount Pleasant Area Community Foundation. So that foundation allots a total of just under $600,000 annually. There's an email to contact. It looks like an individual that is the program director there. I can go to their website. And I can specifically look at some of the different resources that they have available. So I'm going to click on Apply for a Grant. And it's going to give me specific information about the grant, the grants that they have available in the granting process. And you can even download those instructions and utilize their budget template. My community foundation has a number of different ways in which they allocate funding. And there's also different times of the year in which granting takes place. They disseminate money at 3 different portions of the year. Those different times of the year are when all of the final applications must be submitted. Under my community foundation, under grant applications, there's competitive grants and youth advisory council grants. Most of the time, the advisory council grants are related to projects that students may want to initiate. I've specifically used the competitive grants for a number of years. There are some policies and procedures that this organization lays out, so it's important to make sure you familiarize yourself with their policy and procedures. As mentioned, there are some follow-up reports that have to be completed after the initial award is set. If you have a long-term project that is going to continue, there are progress reports that I need to submit periodically if I know that my project is going to last more than, say, a half of a year. They want to know where we are in the progress of that overall project. They also give me an application in a Word format that I can go through and I can fill out. So I have a nice template here from the Community Foundation that I simply fill out. It's important to keep your administration abreast to what you are doing. Before even beginning any of these grant applications, talk to them. There may also be teachers in your district that have spent time applying for some of these different project granting agencies. So seek out their expertise as well. They may know the ins and outs of the overall granting process, and it may help save you time in the long run. There are grants that are available from Michigan foundations and corporations as well. Again, you can just simply go to a Google search and you can type in Michigan Community Service Commission, specifically under the Department of Health and Human Services, and you can search for grants from Michigan foundations and corporations. There are a number of them that are listed there. Again, with grants, there's going to be an initial writing stage, and then there's going to be a follow-up stage where you let your granting agency know how those funds were used. Facebook. Facebook has been a way in which I have chosen to reach out to raise funds. You can simply set up a fundraiser. Now, when you do that, make sure you're having conversations with your administrators. It doesn't look very good if a teacher sets up a fundraiser without having initial conversations, and administrators don't know those are happening. So make sure you talk to your administration and let them know that you're trying to find different ways to raise money, and you're just simply looking for charitable donations, and you'd like to use Facebook for that. I found that Facebook was fairly easy. Setting up the initial amount of money that was desired and then allowing people to just simply donate if they chose was definitely a benefit. There are some additional administrative costs that come out of those that Facebook charges, but they were pretty minimal. You can see in these pictures some of the different things that I raised money for through Facebook fundraisers. In the upper left-hand picture, these are the eggs that we got from a hatchery in Utah. They were overnight aired. They are rainbow trout eggs. They're boxed inside of an insulated box with ice that just drips down on them. There's a lot of paperwork that's involved in allowing for this to happen through the state of Michigan and the Department of Agriculture. So if this is something you decide that you're interested in pursuing, please make sure you get a hold of me and I can walk you through all of the red tape that you have to get through for something similar to this. The next picture to the right is a large-scale aquaponics system that my students built. You can see there's a couple of really large tanks in there. We took all of our rainbow trout eggs that we ordered through that Facebook fundraiser, and they eventually ended up inside of these tanks. The students built the entire system with lumber that we had purchased through a separate Facebook fundraiser. And then this system was entered in a competition where this group of kids ended up taking the grand prize in that competition. An aquaponics system is based on a system where the waste product from the fish cycles through a series of tanks or filtration systems. It then overflows into grow beds where my students were raising different forms of lettuce and tomatoes along with kale and supplying those materials back to our school's cafeteria. The bottom left picture, you can see the rainbow trout that the kids had inside of those tanks a short while after they had finished the construction of the system. So reaching out to your Facebook community may be a benefit. I found that I got involved with the Facebook world because I was feeling as though there were negative things being said regarding schools and school systems, and I was trying to find a way to give a positive light into what was specifically happening in my room. And so I use my Mr. Windsor's Classroom page as an avenue to push out information regarding what's happening in the classroom. And I always keep it positive. I don't get involved in politics. I do also ask at the beginning of the school year to have parents sign a waiver for any picture release. I've had very minimal numbers of parents say that they're not interested in me posting pictures of their kids. When that does happen, I just make sure that any photographs that are taken do not have those students in them. Gofundme has been another resource that I've used. Again, much like Facebook, a lot of the people that have chosen to donate have come directly from our local community, though that is not always the case. As mentioned earlier, we do our Salmon in the Classroom project. We raised some money over a number of years just simply by putting out a GoFundMe that allowed people to access it and then send in some donations specifically to the classroom. A lot of these donations were used for consumable materials like water quality equipment or temperature probes or different forms of lab-based equipment. On GoFundMe's website, teachers will set up their own user account. Once you are logged in, you can start a new fundraiser. Where you simply identify the amount of money you're wishing to raise, who you're raising money for, your local area, and then you'll choose a category as far as what specifically is being used, the money is being used for, and in this case, if you're a teacher looking to incorporate something into your classroom, it's under education and learning. It's pretty easy to go through and create a GoFundMe. Lots of people are using them currently for raising money for charitable needs like medical expenses and stuff. So you can see where this is a project that I specifically tried to raise some money for our Salmon in the Classroom project. It has been deactivated. I haven't used it in a while. But just adding some pictures, an overall description of what we're raising money for. It's pretty easy. I should also let you know that there are some administrative costs that come out of GoFundMe. So if you're raising $500 and that's the exact amount that you need, you may want to ask for something in the neighborhood of $600 because some of those administrative costs are going to come out in the long run. Donors Choose is a great resource that allows teachers to design projects and explain what they would like to raise money for, and then it matches it to different people who might be interested in supporting that classroom. On the website, if you go down and you click on See Teachers Projects, you can scroll through some of the different examples that exist. You can see some of the different things that teachers are trying to raise money for. Different things like tools for reading and writing. Any type of classroom organization type materials, like cabinetry or storage bins. Different types of digital learning tools. So there's lots of different resources that are available, but finding the funding sometimes can be difficult. Donors Choose helps to match the teacher to those resources. Oftentimes at the end of a project, there is a simple thank you that is written by students and sent out to the donors as a requirement for using this organization. Teachers do have to sign in and create an account. If you're a first-timer, all you have to do is create an account. Once the creation of your account is done, you can then identify the project, write up a report about the project that you are trying to fund, and it will be disseminated out on the website. Adopt a Classroom is another resource you might choose to try. Adopt a Classroom requires you to set up a teacher account, and then you need to specifically seek out the different types of materials you are looking to purchase for your project. With Adopt a Classroom, you will set up your own teacher account. You'll edit a classroom profile. After you have donors that have come beside you to sponsor you financially, you can always contact your donors and write thank yous or send letters from students. They do have a list of a number of funding opportunities as well. And so you could go through here and you could look for funding opportunities as far as donation matches or giveaways and seek out opportunities in order to get additional revenue for your classroom. Again, as I mentioned, they do adhere to specific vendors for many of the funds that you end up receiving. There are some ways to request additional vendors. So this is an avenue that you shouldn't consider being limited by those vendors, but there is a little bit of extra work that's involved in getting approval for those purchases outside of the companies they already house. Community outreach. I like to call this one begging. This is how we went about funding our greenhouse. So what I did was I wrote a letter similar to what you see on the left here. After I had some initial conversations with our administration, one of the things that I was really interested in was getting some agricultural-based lessons into the classroom or into our school. We live in a rural agricultural community, and so it seemed like it was probably a benefit to get those ag-type lessons developed into the general ed science classroom. I wrote the letter. Just simply saying that there was some initial support of an amount of financial money, and that information was then disseminated out to community organizations, at community open houses. I printed off the letter. I sent it to businesses. I sent the letter to many businesses that were not even housed or in our community, especially if they had like outreach in our community. Like for example, right now, Tradewinds Energy Company is putting in a whole bunch of wind turbines around us, and they are in the Kansas area, in the state of Kansas. And so I sent out a letter to them, and they financially supported us despite the fact that they really, their headquarters really are not even in the area. So I basically wrote up a letter saying, I'm trying to raise money for the purchase of this greenhouse. The greenhouse is going to cost us X amount of dollars. We have an initial amount of money of this amount, and we're trying to double that amount. Over the course of about 3 months, I was able to raise in the neighborhood of about $75,000. The school did come beside me after that initial amount that was raised, and the school said, instead of all of that money that you've raised going into the foundation of the building, the school used some of the millage money that we had levied in order to support the construction of the foundation. And then we built the greenhouse on top of the framework, if you will, that the school had built. It's always important to remember that if you're doing building type projects, you're going to have to hire somebody to build the actual structure. When we got to the point where we finally were ready to build the greenhouse, we were running short on funds. And my brother lives in the community. He has a contractor's license. And so him, myself, and a number of our maintenance workers every day during my prep period and then outside of the school day, we actually constructed the greenhouse itself. So if you don't have the ability to do that or don't feel comfortable doing that, especially if you're doing some form of construction, make sure you have somebody from the community that is available for that purpose. We also created a general like pamphlet flyer that we sent out into the community at any type of community event. We had a bunch of them available. We printed them out in color so that the community could read about what we were specifically trying to do. And it was pretty amazing watching the support that occurred very quickly after starting this campaign, where people would send $100 or $200 in the form of a check, because they were excited about seeing this being added to our curriculum at the school. So here's a picture of our greenhouse right after it was completed. Another avenue that you might choose in order to get funding, and this is going to be something that in my own personal experience is from being a science teacher. So you may have to seek out other opportunities if you are a social studies, language arts, or math teacher. Some of the different things that I was able to raise money for include Elma College offers a core program where during the summer you do some research with a college professor. And then based on the research that you're doing, when you're finished with that, there is money available for your classroom. A lot of these programs have varying amounts of money. I know Dow Chemical just offered one this past summer, specifically for science teachers as well, which may actually be ongoing currently, where there was a substantial amount of money that was to be redirected into the classroom after the teachers did some initial learning or some initial work on the project that they wanted to do. Michigan State University has offered a sustainability project over a number of summers, which was a 3-day workshop with stipend involved. So the stipend is money in your pocket as a teacher for the time that you were in that workshop. And then also money for your classroom where you could use that for any type of supplies that you might need for a project. In that case, they wanted the project to be wrapped around this idea of sustainability. The Michigan Sea Grant has a number of different opportunities where you can apply for grants or grant funding, or you can do workshops and get a stipend along with some money that's available for you to use for a project in your classroom. So I think the big thing here is be proactive. I've spent a lot of time over the course of my summers seeking out opportunities to continue to learn. I really value learning. I enjoy being in the classroom. I like learning from others. My colleagues are definitely a resource that I use, but going to colleges or going to organizations that have financial resources that are willing to back what I'm doing in the classroom is always a benefit. please feel free to contact me. If anything that I've talked about resonates with you, or if you're sitting there going, I really have this idea for a project I want to do in my classroom, what do you think an avenue is for me to be able to reach my funding goals? Shoot me an email. I will gladly offer my experience. It might not always fit in your subject matter, but I'll do my best to try to guide you in the way that, that might help you or might be the most productive. As you're writing grants, please make sure to understand there is failure. I've written a lot of grants. I've written a lot of proposals that have come back with the letter saying, unfortunately, we only had a certain amount of grant dollars this time. We are unable to fund your project as it is written currently. Don't give up. Be persistent. Persistence is going to be the single most valuable trait that you can possess. If you're interested in some of the activities that I'm doing in my classroom, you can check them out on Facebook at Mr. Windsor's Classroom. Many of the things that I post there, I also post on my Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Windsor. I have a YouTube channel with a number of video resources that you are welcome to use in your classroom anytime. Again, many of these video resources have a slant towards science. Also, I have a number of resources found on my FultonPirates.net website. So I hope that information was helpful to you. I hope you can use it to benefit the students in your classroom. Teaching oftentimes can be difficult, but it's also very rewarding. So thank you for desiring to make the difference in the lives of kids. Best of luck to you as you finish up your degree and move on into the classroom.